Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. A big thanks to LitRPG Reads and our fine fellow Paul Bello for suggesting this awesome topic.
Yeah, this should be fun.
Building a D&D campaign inspired by Norse mythology. Now,
I'm excited.
yeah, you might be thinking Norse mythology. Isn't that
Oh.
just Vikings with helmets and axes?
Right,
Well,
right.
yeah, let me tell you about a session I ran where my players thought the same thing.
Uh-oh.
They charged into a mead hall ready to brawl and completely overlooked the subtle social cues and the intricate honor system that governed the gathering.
Oh, no.
Let's just say things escalated quickly and they ended up with a blood feud on their hands
Oh, wow.
before they even finished their first drink.
That's a classic mistake. It really highlights how crucial it is to understand the cultural nuances of a setting before diving headfirst into action. That's where this article from LitRPG reads, Nordic-inspired D&D setting. Crafting realms of sagas and snow comes in handy. It's not just about throwing in a few long ships and calling it a day. It's about weaving this rich tapestry of Norse society beliefs and environment into a truly immersive experience for your players.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where do we even begin when it comes to bringing those cultural foundations to life? The article mentions social structures, honor codes, family ties.
Yeah.
How do we translate those into actual gameplay mechanics that our players can engage with?
Well, think about honor as a tangible resource, almost like experience points or gold.
Okay.
Imagine a system where players earn honor by upholding oaths, performing selfless deeds, or displaying courage in battle. This honor could then be spent to gain influence within the community's secure alliances or even call upon favors from powerful figures. You could even have a visible honor track where players can see their progress and strive for higher ranks within society.
I like that. It's a concrete way to incentivize players to roleplay in accordance with the setting's values. But what about those family ties and rivalries? The article talks about blood feuds and how they can drive these epic storylines. How would you suggest implementing those without things getting too out of hand?
You could introduce a feud system where certain actions trigger or escalate existing rivalries between clans or families. Imagine a web of interconnected relationships where a player's choices have ripple effects throughout the setting.
Okay.
Maybe insulting a rival clan member during a feast could lead to a minor skirmish, while breaking a sacred oath could ignite a full-blown blood feud with far-reaching consequences.
Now we're talking. That kind of dynamic tension could really keep players on their toes and force them to think carefully about their actions. But let's move beyond the mortal realm for a moment. Norse mythology is famous for its pantheon of powerful gods always meddling in the affairs of humans.
Right.
How do we bring those larger-than-life deities into our D&D campaigns without overshadowing the player characters?
Think of the gods as forces of nature, both benevolent and destructive. They can be sources of quests, challenges, or even divine intervention.
Okay.
Imagine a quest where players must seek the blessing of Freyja for a love-stricken companion, or brave the wrath of Thor to retrieve a stolen artifact. You could even use the gods to create moral dilemmas for your players.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, what if a god offers a character immense power in exchange for a seemingly small act of betrayal or cruelty? Would they succumb to temptation or uphold their values? These kinds of choices can lead to compelling character development and dramatic turning points in your campaign.
That's a great point. It's not just about gods granting magical favors. It's about exploring this complex relationship between mortals and the divine and how those interactions shape their destinies. Speaking of destiny, the article mentions this concept of Weird, which I always found fascinating. It's like this invisible hand guiding the fates of mortals, sometimes with hilarious results. How can we introduce this idea of predetermined fate without stripping away player agency? I mean, it's a game, not a Greek tragedy, right?
Absolutely. Weird doesn't have to be this rigid, inescapable force. Think of it more like a current that characters can navigate, sometimes flowing with it, sometimes struggling against it. You could use prophecies, visions, or even rune readings to give players glimpses into their potential futures, but ultimately their choices determine how those possibilities unfold.
So it's like a nudge in a certain direction, not a predetermined script. Players can defy their fate, but it might come with consequences or unexpected twists. I love that idea. It adds a layer of suspense and intrigue without robbing players of their free will.
Sure.
But even with divine intervention and prophecies, your characters still need to survive the harsh realities of the Nordic landscape.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking freezing blizzards, icy winds, perpetual darkness. This isn't a walk in the park. How do we translate that sense of environmental challenge into gameplay mechanics that feel meaningful and engaging?
Well, we need to make the environment an active character in the story, not just a pretty backdrop.
Mhm.
Think beyond just describing a blizzard, implement a system where exposure to extreme cold has tangible consequences.
Okay.
You could introduce a cold track, similar to the honor track, where prolonged exposure leads to fatigue, frostbite, and eventually even death if players aren't prepared.
Ooh, I like that. It raises the stakes and makes survival a constant concern. So it's not just about slaying monsters. It's about battling the elements themselves. Players would need to think carefully about shelter warmth and resource management, which adds a whole new dimension to the gameplay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget about the unique challenges posed by things like perpetual darkness or the midnight sun. Imagine navigating a world where the sun never sets, or where the nights are so long and dark that even the bravest warriors can lose their way.
Right?
You could have encounters with creatures that thrive in darkness, or introduce mechanics where players need to track their mental state to avoid going mad from lack of sunlight.
That's such a cool idea. It's like the environment itself is a monster constantly testing their limits. But speaking of monsters, Norse mythology is brimming with fascinating creatures. From trolls lurking under bridges to frost giants roaming the frozen wastes.
Right.
How do we incorporate those creatures into our campaigns in a way that feels authentic and engaging, not just like we're throwing random monsters at our players?
Well, instead of just using them as stat blocks to be defeated, we need to think about their roles in Norse mythology and how they fit into the ecosystem of this world. Are they mindless beasts, or do they possess a cunning intelligence? Do they have their own motivations, desires, or even connections to the gods?
Okay, so it's about giving them depth and personality, making them more than just things to fight. I like that. So instead of just having a troll block a bridge and demand a toll, we could give it a backstory, a reason for being there, maybe even a riddle to solve or a task to complete.
Exactly. Maybe that troll is guarding an ancient artifact, or perhaps it's seeking a specific herb to cure its sick child. By giving these creatures depth, you create opportunities for interaction beyond just combat.
That opens up so many possibilities. It's not just about slaying monsters. It's about understanding them, maybe even negotiating with them or forming alliances. And that brings us to the magic systems of Norse mythology, which are so unique and intriguing. The article mentions Galdr and nature magic, but it doesn't delve too deeply into how those systems work. How do we translate those magical concepts into mechanics that our players can use in a D&D setting?
That's where the real fun begins. We can take inspiration from existing spell lists and adapt them to fit the unique flavor of Norse magic.
Okay.
For example, Cider, with its focus on divination and manipulation, could be represented by spells that allow players to glimpse the future, influence minds, or even communicate with spirits.
That's awesome. So instead of just casting a generic charm spell, a Cider practitioner could use a specific rune combination to weave a spell that subtly influences a target's emotions or whispers suggestions into their mind.
Exactly. And Galdr, with its emphasis on rune chanting and shaping nature, could manifest as spells that enhance luck, control the weather, or even imbue objects with magical properties. Imagine a bard using Galdr to weave enchantments into their songs, inspiring their allies or weakening their foes.
Okay, now I'm officially intrigued. It's like each type of magic has its own unique feel and application, which adds so much depth to the gameplay.
Right.
Let's not forget about those runic arts, which seem to be woven into every aspect of Norse magic.
Right.
The article mentions the Elder Futhark, but it doesn't go into much detail about how individual runes work or how they can be used in a D&D campaign. How can we incorporate those runes into our magic systems and give them a meaningful role in gameplay?
Well, we can treat each rune as a mini-spell component, a building block for more complex magic. Imagine a system where players can combine different runes to create unique spell effects or inscribe them on weapons and armor to grant special abilities. For example, the Alges rune, often associated with protection, could be used to create a shield spell, while the Tuaz rune, representing victory and justice, could be used to imbue a weapon with extra damage against evil creatures.
That's brilliant. Yeah. It makes runes more than just symbols. They become tools, resources, even weapons in their own right. And it adds a layer of customization and complexity to the magic system that I think players would really appreciate.
Exactly. And don't forget about the visual aspect of runes. Imagine players physically carving runes onto their weapons or casting spells by tracing rune patterns in the air.
Ooh, I can already picture it. My players huddled around a campfire, carving runes onto their gear by firelight, whispering incantations as they prepare for their next adventure. It's so evocative and thematic. But speaking of adventure, we can't forget about the warrior culture that's so central to Norse society. The article emphasizes the importance of honor and reputation in battle, but how do we translate those concepts into mechanics that make combat feel more than just rolling dice and dealing damage?
Well, we can introduce a system where certain actions in battle, like defending a comrade or defeating a powerful foe, earn renown points, which contribute to a character's overall reputation. This renown could then translate into tangible benefits, like gaining influence within a community, attracting followers, or even earning the right to challenge a rival for leadership.
That's awesome. It gives combat a purpose beyond just survival.
Yeah.
It becomes a way for characters to prove their worth, gain status, and advance their goals within the setting.
Precisely. And we can go even further by incorporating specific fighting styles or techniques inspired by Norse warfare. Think about the shield wall, where warriors stand shoulder to shoulder, forming an impenetrable barrier, or the berserker rage, where a warrior abandons all sense of self-preservation in a furious onslaught. These aren't just flavor texts, they can be translated into actual combat maneuvers or abilities that give players more tactical options and strategic depth.
Okay, now I'm really getting excited. Imagine a player using the shield wall tactic to protect their allies from a volley of arrows, or another player channeling their inner berserker to unleash a devastating attack, but at the risk of losing control. It's not just about hitting hard, it's about fighting smart, using tactics and techniques that are authentic to the setting. But speaking of authenticity, we can't ignore the tradition of raiding that's so deeply ingrained in Norse culture. The article mentions seafaring skills, strategic planning, and the social dynamics of sharing plunder. But how do we turn those elements into a compelling gameplay experience that goes beyond just sail to a location and fight some bad guys?
We can create a campaign where players are part of a Viking crew embarking on daring raids across the seas. Imagine them sailing longships, navigating treacherous waters, scouting potential targets, and planning their attacks with strategic precision. We can even incorporate minigames or skill challenges for things like navigation, ship-to-ship combat, or even negotiating the division of spoils.
I love that idea. It's like a whole campaign within a campaign focused on the thrill of exploration, the strategic challenges of raiding, and the social dynamics of a tight-knit crew. And speaking of longships, those iconic vessels were more than just transportation. They were extensions of Viking culture, symbols of power and craftsmanship. How do we bring those longships to life in our D&D campaigns, making them more than just vehicles, but integral parts of the setting and the story?
We can treat longships as characters in their own right, each with its own history, personality, and even magical properties. Players could participate in the construction of their ship, choosing materials, customizing its design, and imbuing it with runes for protection or speed. We could even introduce ship combat mechanics, where players take on specific roles during battles, manning the oars, firing arrows, or even boarding enemy vessels in thrilling hand-to-hand combat.
That's epic. It's like turning the longship into a mobile base of operations, a character that evolves and grows alongside the party. But let's not forget about the settlements that dot this harsh and unforgiving landscape. The article mentions longhouses, mead halls, and blacksmith forges. But how do we make those settlements feel like living, breathing communities that our players can interact with and even influence?
Well, instead of just treating them as points on a map, we need to flesh out their unique cultures, traditions, and power structures.
Okay.
Imagine a village known for its skilled shipbuilders, where players could learn the craft or commission a custom-built longship. Or a town ruled by a tyrannical jarl, where players might find themselves caught in political intrigue or even leading a rebellion.
Okay, now I'm really getting into this. It's like each settlement has its own story to tell its own challenges and opportunities, and those stories can become interwoven with a larger narrative of the campaign, creating a truly immersive experience. But speaking of stories, we can't forget about the political systems that govern this world. The article mentions jarldoms all things and the influence of skalds, but how do those systems actually function in a D&D setting, and how can players interact with them in a meaningful way?
Well, we can create a dynamic political landscape where players can navigate alliances, rivalries, and power struggles. Imagine them attending a thing assembly where they can debate laws, negotiate treaties, or even campaign for leadership positions. We can even introduce mechanics for social influence, where players can use their skills and resources to sway public opinion, gain favor with powerful figures, or even spread rumors to undermine their rivals.
That's fantastic. It's like turning the entire setting into a giant political game board, where players' choices have ripple effects throughout the world.
Exactly. And don't forget about the role of skalds, those poet historians who wield the power of words. Players could encounter skalds who can immortalize their deeds in song, spread their fame throughout the land, or even twist the narrative to their advantage.
Ooh, I love that idea. It adds another layer of intrigue and complexity to the political landscape. Imagine a player trying to bribe a skald to compose a flattering song about them, or a rival using a skald to spread malicious rumors. It's a whole new dimension to the gameplay. But speaking of new dimensions, let's talk about the afterlife. The article touches on Valhalla, Vangri, and Hell, but how do those realms actually function in a D&D campaign? And how can we make them more than just you die, you go here destinations?
We can treat those realms as extensions of the mortal world, each with its own unique culture, challenges, and opportunities. Imagine Valhalla as a training ground for warriors, where players can hone their skills and earn glory in eternal combat. Or Folkvanger as a paradise, where players can indulge their passions and revel in beauty. Even Hell, often depicted as a gloomy underworld, could be a realm of mystery and intrigue, where players can bargain with spirits, uncover ancient secrets, or even seek redemption for past misdeeds.
That's a fantastic way to think about it. It's not just about ending up in a specific place after death. It's about continuing the adventure in a whole new realm with its own set of rules and possibilities.
Exactly. And we can even use the afterlife to create narrative hooks or plot twists. Imagine a player character making a deal with a spirit in hell to return to the mortal world, or a character sacrificing themselves to enter Valhalla and seek guidance from fallen heroes.
That's so cool. It adds a layer of depth and consequence to the choices players make, knowing that their actions could have ramifications that extend beyond their mortal lives. But speaking of things that last beyond a lifetime, let's talk about the crafting traditions that are so integral to Norse culture. The article mentions the skill and artistry of Norse craftspeople. But how do we translate those traditions into engaging gameplay mechanics that allow players to create meaningful items and connect with the cultural heritage of this world?
We can create a crafting system that goes beyond just gather materials and roll a dice. Imagine players seeking out master artisans to learn ancient techniques, forging weapons with legendary properties, or weaving tapestries imbued with protective runes. We can even introduce rituals or challenges associated with crafting, where players must demonstrate their skill knowledge or even make sacrifices to imbue their creations with power.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It makes crafting a meaningful and rewarding part of the gameplay, not just a way to get better gear, but a way to connect with the history and culture of this world.
Exactly. Imagine a player crafting a sword passed down through generations of their family, each wielder adding their own unique rune inscription, or a player creating a piece of jewelry imbued with a spirit from the afterlife, granting them special powers or guidance.
That's so cool. It's like each crafted item becomes a story in itself, a tangible link to the past, and a potential source of power or intrigue. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here, but we've only scratched the surface of what's possible when it comes to building a D&D campaign inspired by Norse mythology. What are some final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up part 1 of this deep dive?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is that Norse mythology is a rich and versatile source of inspiration, offering a wealth of ideas for crafting, engaging, and immersive campaigns. It's not just about Vikings and battles, it's about exploring a complex culture with its own unique values, beliefs, and stories.
I couldn't agree more. It's about bringing that culture to life in a way that feels authentic and engaging for your players, using the mechanics of D&D as a framework to create a world that feels both familiar and fantastical. And it's about having fun. Don't be afraid to experiment, to get creative, to draw inspiration from other sources, and to make this world your own. We've given you the tools. Now it's time to build something amazing.
And as we dive deeper into this world of sagas and snow, it's important to remember that the article doesn't just provide a blueprint. It offers a springboard for your own creativity.
You're absolutely right. It's like they've given us all the ingredients for this delicious Nordic feast.
Yeah.
But it's up to us as dungeon masters and players to come up with a recipe.
Exactly.
How do we take these elements and make them our own?
Let's go back to that concept of honor as a currency. The article suggests using it as a tangible resource, but how you implement that system is entirely up to you. Think about what actions in your world would be considered honorable and how you can reward players for embodying those values.
I'm already imagining a system where upholding oaths, performing selfless deeds, or displaying courage in battle earns you honor points, kind of like experience points.
Yeah.
Those points could then be spent to gain favors, influence decisions, or even access special abilities or training.
Precisely. And you could even visualize that system with an honor track, like a character progression chart, so players can see their standing within the community and strive for higher ranks. It's a great way to tie mechanics to role-playing and encourage players to really embrace the cultural values of the setting.
I love that. But let's not forget about those family rivalries. The article mentions blood feuds as potential plot hooks. But how can we implement those without derailing the entire campaign? Things could get messy pretty fast if every minor insult leads to all-out war.
That's where careful planning and clear communication with your players come in. You could introduce a feud system where certain actions like breaking an oath or insulting a rival clan member escalate tensions and lead to consequences. Maybe there is a scale of severity starting with minor skirmishes and escalating to full-blown blood feuds with far-reaching consequences.
That makes sense. You could even have a mechanic where players can try to de-escalate feuds through diplomacy, negotiation, or even arranged marriages between rival families.
Yeah.
It adds a layer of strategic decision-making and social intrigue to the game.
Exactly. And let's not limit ourselves to the major gods like Odin, Thor, and Freyja. The Norse pantheon is full of fascinating deities, each with their own unique personality and domain of influence. How can we bring those lesser-known gods into our campaigns?
That's a great point. I'm thinking about Loki, the trickster god, or Heimdall, the watchful guardian of Asgard, or even Balder, the god of light and beauty.
Yeah.
Each of those gods could offer unique quests, challenges, or even divine interventions that could really spice up the campaign.
Imagine a quest where players have to navigate the treacherous realm of Svartalfheim, the home of the Dark Elves, to seek a favor from Loki. Or maybe they find themselves caught in a divine feud between Thor and the Frost Giants, forced to choose a side or try to broker a peace.
Now we're talking. That's the kind of epic storytelling that really gets me excited about running a Norse-inspired campaign. But let's not forget about prophecy and fate. The article mentions runes as a way to glimpse destiny. But what if there were other ways to interact with Ferd?
You could introduce oracles or seers who offer cryptic visions or ancient artifacts that hold the key to unlocking hidden prophecies. Maybe there's a ritual that allows players to briefly peer into the tapestry of fate, but at a cost.
Ooh, that's a great idea. What if they get a glimpse of their future, but it comes with a curse or a dark premonition? It adds a layer of risk and reward to messing with fate.
Exactly. It's all about finding ways to make fate an active element of the campaign, something that players can interact with and even try to manipulate, even if they can't fully escape its grasp. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the harsh Nordic environment. Blizzards shouldn't just be flavor text, they should have real consequences.
You're absolutely right. Imagine a system where exposure to extreme cold leads to fatigue, frostbite, and eventually even hypothermia if players aren't prepared.
You could even introduce a cold track similar to the honor track, where prolonged exposure without proper gear or shelter has tangible consequences. It makes survival a constant concern, and it encourages players to think carefully about resource management, shelter, and planning for the harsh conditions.
It's such a cool way to make the environment an active force in the game. It's not just a pretty backdrop, it's a character in itself, challenging the players at every turn. And speaking of challenges, the article does a fantastic job of outlining the different types of magic found in Norse mythology, but it's up to us to bring them to life in our campaigns.
Absolutely. Take sight, for example. It's described as a form of divination and manipulation. But what does that actually look like in gameplay? What are the spells, the rituals, the consequences of wielding such power? How do we make it feel distinct from other forms of magic?
Well, we could tie cider magic to a system of runes, where specific combinations unlock different abilities from peering into the future to influencing the minds of others.
That's a great idea. Maybe cider practitioners have to make sacrifices or pay a spiritual price to access their powers, creating a moral dilemma for players who want to dabble in this forbidden art. What about Galdur, the magic of rune chanting?
We could imagine a bard who uses their songs to enhance their allies' luck in battle, or a sorcerer who calls upon the power of the runes to summon storms and earthquakes. It's all about finding ways to make those magic systems feel unique and engaging not just reskinned versions of existing spells.
And let's not forget about those runic arts, which seem to be woven into every aspect of Norse magic. The Elder Futhark is just the beginning. There's so much potential for exploring other runic alphabets, or even creating custom runes with unique properties for your campaign setting.
Ooh, I love that idea. Imagine a quest where players have to decipher ancient runic inscriptions to unlock a hidden tomb or uncover a lost prophecy. Or maybe they discover a forgotten rune with the power to control the elements, but wielding that power comes at a terrible cost.
It's all about finding ways to make runes more than just symbols. They should be tools, weapons, keys to unlocking hidden mysteries and shaping the very fabric of reality. And speaking of shaping reality, we need to talk about the warrior culture and how we can make combat more than just a dice-rolling exercise.
You're right. Battles should be opportunities for characters to showcase their skills, earn glory, and maybe even compose a saga-worthy tale of their own.
Imagine a system where certain actions in battle, like defeating a powerful foe, or defending a comrade, earn renown points that translate into tangible benefits like increased influence access to better equipment, or even the right to challenge a rival for leadership.
That's a great way to add weight and consequence to combat. It's not just about survival. It's about building a reputation, earning respect, and climbing the social ladder.
And don't forget about the visual and tactical aspects of combat. Think about incorporating specific fighting styles like the shield wall, where warriors stand shoulder to shoulder, forming an impenetrable barrier, or the berserker rage, where a warrior abandons all sense of self-preservation in a furious onslaught.
I can already picture the scene. A group of warriors, their shields interlocked, advancing slowly but relentlessly on a horde of goblins, their faces grim with determination. Or a lone berserker, eyes blazing with fury, charging into the fray, hacking and slashing with reckless abandon. It's cinematic, it's visceral, it's pure Norse awesomeness.
Exactly. And let's not forget about those raiding customs. We talked about incorporating seafaring skills and strategic planning. But how do we make the social dynamics of a raiding crew come alive in the game?
We could turn the players into a Viking crew sailing the seas in search of adventure and plunder. They have to navigate treacherous waters, scout out potential targets, and plan their raids carefully. But they also have to deal with the interpersonal conflicts and power struggles that inevitably arise within a tight-knit group.
Imagine the tension as they divide the spoils of their raids. Greed, jealousy, even loyalty can be tested as they decide who gets what and who gets bragging rights for the most daring feats. It adds a whole layer of social interaction and decision-making to the game.
And let's not forget about the longships themselves. We talked about treating them as characters, but how can we really make them feel like extensions of Viking culture and power?
We could incorporate rituals and traditions associated with shipbuilding. Imagine players participating in the launching ceremony of their ship, offering sacrifices to the sea gods, or even carving protective runes into the hull. Or they could seek out legendary shipbuilders who possess secret knowledge or techniques passed down through generations.
Ooh, I love that.
The
It adds a layer of depth and meaning to the process of acquiring a longship. It's not just a transaction, it's an event, a story in itself. But let's move beyond the ships and talk about the settlements that dot this harsh and unforgiving landscape.
We talked about fleshing out their unique cultures and traditions, but how do we make those settlements feel like places where players can truly make a difference, leave their mark on the world?
We could give them opportunities to participate in local politics, solve community problems, or even lead construction projects.
Yeah.
Imagine players helping to build a new mead hall, or negotiating a trade agreement with a neighboring village, or even leading the defense against a bandit raid.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the visual aspect of these settlements. Think about the architecture, the layout, the details that make them come alive in the players' imaginations.
I'm picturing longhouses with intricately carved doorways, mead halls filled with boisterous laughter, and the clang of tankards, blacksmith forges glowing with the heat of the furnace. It's all about creating a sense of place, a sense of history, a sense of community. But communities need governance, right? How do we bring the political systems of this world to life in a way that feels authentic and engaging for the players?
We can give them opportunities to interact with Jarls, attend Thing assemblies, or even participate in trials or legal proceedings. Imagine players trying to influence a Jarl's decision, or debating a new law at the Thing, or defending an innocent person accused of a crime.
That's a great way to introduce political intrigue and moral dilemmas into the game. It's not just about slaying monsters, it's about navigating the complexities of power, justice, and social responsibility. And speaking of responsibility, we can't forget about the role of skalds in shaping public opinion and preserving history.
Imagine players encountering skalds who can immortalize their deeds in song, spread their fame throughout the land, or even twist the narrative to their advantage.
Ooh, that's a great idea. Players could try to befriend a skald, commission a song about their exploits, or even use their influence to silence a rival's bard.
Exactly. It adds a layer of intrigue and reputation management to the game. But let's shift our focus from the world of the living to the realm of the dead. We talked about making Valhalla, Folkvanger, and Hell more than just you die, you go here destinations, but how do we actually incorporate them into the gameplay?
We could allow players to interact with spirits from the afterlife, seek guidance from fallen heroes, or even bargain with gods or demons. Imagine a player character making a deal with a Valkyrie to cheat death, or seeking a lost artifact hidden in the depths of hell.
That's a fantastic way to add depth and consequence to the game. It's not just about what happens in the mortal realm, it's about the ripple effects of actions that extend beyond life and death.
It's about creating a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead are blurred, where ancient myths and legends come to life, and where every choice, every action has the potential to shape the fate of the world. But before we get too carried away with the epic scope of all of this, let's bring it back down to earth for a moment and talk about those crafting traditions that are so integral to Norse culture. We talked about making crafting a more immersive and meaningful experience, but how do we actually implement that in a way that's both fun and challenging for players?
We could introduce a system where crafting requires more than just gathering materials and rolling dice. Imagine players having to seek out master artisans, learn ancient techniques, or even perform rituals to imbue their creations with power.
Ooh, I love that idea. It turns crafting into a quest in itself, a journey of discovery and mastery.
And let's not forget about the cultural significance of these crafts. Imagine players creating items that are not just functional, but also beautiful and symbolic, reflecting the artistic traditions and beliefs of this world.
I'm imagining intricately carved runes, weapons forged with the blessings of the gods, or clothing woven with threads spun by moonlight. It's about making every crafted item feel like a piece of history, a work of art, a story waiting to be told. And that, I think, is what this whole discussion's about. It's about taking the rich tapestry of Norse mythology and culture and weaving it into a compelling and unforgettable gaming experience for our players.
It's about creating a world where ancient legends come to life, where heroes rise to meet impossible challenges, and where every adventure is a saga worthy of being sung by the skalds.
I think that's a perfect note to end part 2 of our deep dive. We've explored a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to discover. Join us for part 3, where we'll delve even deeper into the realms of Norse mythology and D&D, and we'll discuss how to tailor these concepts to your own unique campaign setting and style. Welcome back to our deep dive into all things Norse and D&D. And we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
From social structures and honor codes to magic systems and those monstrous encounters. But now it's time to talk about how you can take all of this inspiration and tailor it to your own unique campaign setting and play style.
That's right. The beauty of this article is that it doesn't give you this rigid set of rules.
Right.
It provides a framework for building a world that reflects your vision as a storyteller.
So if I'm a dungeon master who loves political intrigue and complex social interactions, I could create a campaign that focuses on the power struggles between jarldoms or the intricate workings of the Thing Assembly.
Exactly. You could have your players navigating a web of alliances and betrayals, trying to influence policy decisions, or even vying for leadership positions within their community.
Ooh, I can already imagine the drama unfolding as my players try to outmaneuver each other at a Thing Assembly, using their skills and resources to sway public opinion or broker deals behind closed doors. But what if I'm more drawn to the mystical side of Norse mythology?
Then you could create a campaign that delves into the mysteries of cider magic, the power of the runes, and the intricate workings of fate.
My players could become practitioners of cider, seeking ancient knowledge, communing with spirits, or even manipulating the threads of destiny. Or maybe they're tasked with deciphering cryptic prophecies, tracking down lost artifacts, or confronting powerful beings who threaten to unravel the fabric of reality.
It's all about finding the aspects of Norse mythology that resonate with you and building a world that reflects those interests. And don't forget to involve your players in the process.
That's such an important point. This is a collaborative storytelling experience, and the player's input is invaluable. Before you even start designing your campaign, have a conversation with your players. Find out what aspects of Norse mythology excite them, what kind of characters they want to play, and what kind of stories they want to tell.
Maybe one of your players is obsessed with Vikings and long ships. In that case, you could create a campaign where they're part of a raiding crew sailing the seas in search of plunder and glory.
Or perhaps another player is fascinated by the gods and goddesses. You could give them opportunities to interact with the divine pantheon, seek favors, perform quests, or even challenge the gods themselves.
It's about creating a shared experience, a story that everyone at the table can contribute to and enjoy.
And that's where the real magic of a Norse-inspired campaign lies. In the collaboration, the creativity, and the shared passion for storytelling.
It's about taking these ancient myths, these timeless tales, and breathing new life into them, infusing them with your own ideas and the imaginations of your players.
And in doing so, you create something truly special. A world that feels both familiar and fresh, a story that's both epic and personal, an adventure that will stay with you long after the final dice have been rolled.
So go forth and create. Embrace the spirit of the skalds, weave your own sagas, and build a world where legends are forged in the fires of adventure.
We'd love to hear about the amazing campaigns you're creating. What are your favorite aspects of Norse mythology? What kind of challenges and opportunities are you building into your worlds? Leave us a comment and share your ideas. And a huge thanks again to LitRPG Reads and to our fine fellow Paul Bello for suggesting this awesome topic. Until next time, may your dice roll ever in your favor.